Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zanu PF is finding it increasingly difficult, if not impossible, to sell the idea that this constitutional amendment number 3 is in the national interest. There is no one with half a brain out there who is failing to see that this is just another step by Zanu PF to consolidate its stranglehold on power, and it's not in the national interest. Here is one of Africa's articulate individuals who many Zimbabweans know only too well, speaking on this constitutional amendment number 3.
Power. The government and its political praise singers have the audacity to look into the cameras and say that elections are toxic. They claim that elections hamper development. They said they need more time to complete their programs. What utter nonsense. The only thing that is toxic in Zimbabwe is a ruling elite that uses violence to silence dissenting voices. You do not cure the difficulties of democracy by amputating the will of the people. If you are truly delivering for the people, if your development is real, why are you afraid of the ballot box? A leader who is loved by the people does not need to rewrite the constitution in the dark. He goes to the people, presents his record, and asks for a renewed mandate. But this regime is running scared. They are terrified of the very people they claim to serve. When President Emerson Mnangagwa took power, there was a whisper of hope. He promised reforms. He declared Zimbabwe open for business. But look at the reality today. We are witnessing the resurrection of a ghost. The ghost of Robert Mugabe's 37-year rule. A snake can shed its skin, but the venom remains exactly the same.
Well. What can I say? Welcome to the program, Ben.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. I don't think I could have even put it any better. I think Professor there is spot on. I'll start by, this whole Vision 2030, because this gave birth to all the extensions that they want to do and the whole amendment bill. I mean, for years we have been talking about, show us, the foundation to this whole 2030 upper middle income economy. And we are almost, to the end of Mnangagwa's term, and we do not have a foundation yet. Not to talk of, a building that we can see that, they were taking us from point A to point B. The whole 2030 was just a mirage. The whole agenda, we are now seeing it. It was to extend their stay in power. Period. There was nothing, no development that we can talk about, except probably a trababelas that we see. The rest is just nonsense. Zimbabweans are no better than they were during Mugabe's rule. In fact, probably they're now worse off, because we are seeing the economy tumbling. We are seeing big retail shops closed down. We are seeing hospitals empty without any medicines. People now are having to go as far as South Africa to go and get medical care. So there is no development to talk about. It was all just a plot to extend their stay and their grip on power.
What I find really interesting about this debate is the very fact that we have got intellectuals like Professor Lumumba there from Kenya saying something that many Zimbabweans there have failed to say. There is no one with half a brain who can honestly say this constitutional amendment bill is anything other than what it is. Another attempt by Zanu PF to consolidate its iron grip on power. The regime has never allowed the nation to hold free, fair, and credible elections, and has been moving into, ever since the 2008 elections, it consolidated its de facto one-party state, thanks to the opposition's failure to implement even one token reform when they had the opportunity to do so. This constitutional amendment bill is nothing more than a follow-up to that. Mnangagwa, as Professor Lumumba correctly pointed out in that video clip, came into power in 2017 on the cocktail of a military coup. He promised to implement reforms to hold free, fair, and credible elections, and yet he went on to blatantly rig the 2018 elections and then the 2023 elections. Both SADC and the AU condemned last 2023 elections as flawed and illegal. And now he is seeking to consolidate his illegitimate stay in power by extending it. This whole constitutional amendment is a farce. The people themselves are being sold a falsehood. They are being told that if you voted for this amendment bill, your suffering will end. And only those who really do not understand what's going on believe that nonsense. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Why Zimbabwe's intellectuals have been silent in the face of this beggar's belief. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. And I salute people like Professor Lumumba, who are saying things that we Zimbabweans ourselves are failing to say.
SADC and all the other observer missions, during the 2023 elections, they reported that the elections were not only flawed, but they went and said they were illegal. They did not measure up to the standards set internationally and did not even conform to our own constitution, what is set in the constitution. So Zanu PF were clearly in violation of international laws and domestic. Now we are finding out that for them to want to correct their mistake, they are now totally removing any power from the people. We know the elections were flawed, but now they want to take it a step further and remove, the people from the equation, basically. I don't, it's very weird when, Zanu PF members come up and say, presidential elections are toxic. I mean, look, you set the platform. You basically, Zanu PF controls the election process through their, through Zek, who, in my opinion, is also just Zanu PF in all but name, because just the consistent of Zek itself, the people in there are none other than Zanu PF children. So it is Zanu PF, basically. How you can try and fix something that is flawed and illegal by shutting up the people is absurd. And like how Professor Lumumba puts it, he says, it is nonsensical. It is utter nonsense. You cannot fix something just to benefit you yourself. In fact, the Constitution says you cannot benefit from any of these extensions that you are, about to embark. But funny enough, in Zanu PF, it's doable. It doesn't matter. Now it's likened to an employee giving himself a contract extension without the boss having a say. You don't need to say anything. I'm going to work until 2030, and you pay me for it. Only in Zimbabwe, that's what I can say. Only in Zimbabwe where you can find such stupidity happening.
I think one of the things that we can say consistently is that the people who have been brainwashed into thinking that this constitutional amendment will benefit them are the poorest of the poor, who do not understand what Zanu PF has been doing, and are only being told here that if you want development, a tacit way of acknowledging that there's not been any development, you have got to accept this amendment bill to go through. And if you are one of those 49% who are living in abject poverty, extreme poverty in Zimbabwe, you are tempted to go for this amendment. Because after 46 years of suffering, you think, okay, if this is what we need to do to end my suffering, let's go for it. The truth of the matter is, this is just another lie by Zanu PF. We are being shortchanged once again and being denied a meaningful say. These people will wake up, they've approved this amendment bill, and find the little democratic power that they had is gone. Here is a typical Zanu PF supporter with the mentality that the regime is doing things in his favor.
Panapa pakanyorwa kunzi kudya, pakanyorwa nemawara makura, pakanyorwa kunzi kudya. Musarare pano. Pakati musarare pano here papa. Pakanyorwa kunzi musarase marara pano. aiwa is the same kuita sei tiri kubvisa marara kuti vanhu pachenei muri apa muchiisa marara ime muchabvisirei marara acho webwibwe ukati kutaura kuti government ndinoda kuti nzvimbo dzichene nzvimbo dziswe marara kufaitawo na kolera imu ndo pamuri kuya muchirasira marara ipapa manje nhasi tiri kusunga tikuenda nemi mukurara muchitokisi nhasi matosunga imimi nai ministry musangano guys asunga zvekumhanya aiwa musangano kuita sei musangano ndototi vanhu varasire marara pese pese ndozviri kutaurwa nemutungamiri wenyika izvozvo eka marara for ed taurai zvina basa muchanozvitaurira makukoti uko nhasi muchanotsanangura handeitoni kamani kutara aiwa.
The truth of the matter is, this whole debate, this whole constitutional amendment is being conducted in such a way, it is being presented to the people who do not even understand its full import. The full import is, this is just another step of Zanu PF consolidating its tyrannical rule. How the people who are being denied their fundamental rights right now can expect to benefit from Zanu PF becoming another North Korea. Beggars belief, but that is the reality, and that is the tragedy. And I would like to emphasize here that I salute intellectuals like Professor Lumumba, who has been very articulate on this very issue. It is a tragedy that Zimbabwe has got a lot of intellectuals, and yet they've been as silent as a grave. They are not telling people the real import of this constitutional amendment. And so ordinary people are being misled. Indeed, some of the intellectuals are the ones who are encouraging people to participate in this flawed process. They know that Zanu PF will rig and force through this amendment. And by participating, by encouraging people to participate, you're only giving the process legitimacy. But we know they've been doing this out of greed. That is the true tragedy of Zimbabwe. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
You know, we have seen the likes of people like Themba Mliswa teaching children that, you know, you can move. He had set 3 chairs and he was likening them to the first, second, and third term. And he says, as long as you don't sit on the 3rd chair, you are not in the 3rd term. But you can push the 2nd chair as far as you are. You know, such a teaching is very dangerous. And we've spoken about it to say one can then decide to extend his 2nd term indefinitely. And we are seeing this in Zanu PF. They have disregarded any law that is set within Zimbabwe or within the constitution. They will do whatever it takes to hold on to power. And I'm glad you spoke about the so-called intellectuals in Zimbabwe. We are seeing this group as if, you know, they do not understand what is really happening here. And they're encouraging the not so privileged to run with it. We need a referendum. We don't need a referendum. A lot of people do not even understand what this bill is all about. I mean, we've had people that went to anti-sanction marches, and when they were asked what the sanctions were, they really did not know, but they went anyway. So the so-called intellectuals are then now manipulating, you know, the simple-minded layman out there into doing whatever they, you know, their bid is. And we know that both Zanu PF and the opposition, their main agenda is to participate in any kind of election, rigged, flawed, they don't mind, as long as they get their, you know, they get into parliament or get into any public position. It is fine with them. This is where we have a problem. And this is where Zimbabweans must then stand and fight. This is where our fight is in the first place. Any other than fighting for free, fair, and credible elections is a secondary issue. It's a disease that was brought about by not holding free, fair, and credible elections in the first place. So I still encourage everybody out there, our fight and our number one agenda should be that Zimbabwe needs to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That way we can get a government that is for the people and by the people. And once we have that there, we can have accountability from our leaders. We can now chase away those that want to give themselves contracts. Because at the end of the day, we are the bosses of the land. We own Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe belongs to Zimbabweans. Thank you.
My closing remark will be that Zimbabwe is a failed state because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, and have been stuck for the last 46 years and counting with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship, complete with its MDC triple C, corrupt and utterly useless sidekick. This constitutional amendment, Bill number 3, is seeking to consolidate Zanu PF strong political stranglehold on the nation. It's not going to create a more democratic society. It's the opposite. Zanu PF is seeking more dictatorial powers than they already have. The number one task for the nation should have been to educate the people to realize what the real input of this amendment bill is. And I salute people like Professor Lumumba to highlight that point. It is a pity that we have got many Zimbabwean intellectuals and they have failed the nation in this regard. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.